Amazing. So welcome to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about Dark Social, your secret marketing engagement opportunity. I'm Ben Odell. I'm the Director of Demand Gen here at Exclaimer, and I'm going to be a host and moderator, but I'm really excited to share with you Arthur Castillo, Head of Dark Social and Evangelism at Chili Piper, of course, and Andy Davis, Director of Growth at Hotjar. Guys, welcome, and we're delighted to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's going to be a fun chat we got planned here.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having us.
No, of course. So today we're going to take you through 3 stages with this. Of course, we've promised to share some strategies, but first we're going to cover what is Dark Social, and Arthur's going to lead the way on that. And then we're going to go into, at the end, how to actually attribute and get buy-in for this as well. So Arthur, I'll pass it over to you now for the question, what is Dark Social?
Yes, of course. So it's been quite the buzzword these days. I think in true marketing fashion, we've given word of mouth a nice little rebrand. So I think if you want to look at it for simplicity's sake, it's really scaled word of mouth. This has always existed, right? People are talking about it. I think the difference in what we're seeing now is in the frequency in which it happens, right? So traditionally, let's say 5-10 years ago, the only time you'd ever get in a room full of your peers would maybe be that annual conference, right? Where you get together, you're talking about challenges, opportunities, you can go back and forth. Now we have things like social media and LinkedIn and communities where daily we can go and interact with our peers and actually message them directly and say, hey, how did you solve this challenge? Or what the heck are you using for this? And that's typically where the buying conversations happen. I think the dark part of Dark Social is every marketer wants to know really where that demand was generated. But in most cases, let's say this webinar, we drop a couple of companies that me and Andy are big fans of or we use. And then somebody hears that and says, hey, you know what? I'm looking into the same thing. Maybe I'll check out this website. And they end up requesting a demo. Well, their analytics will either tell them organic or direct traffic. And as a result, you might say, hey, we should invest more in Google Ads because that's what our attribution software told us. But really, where the generation of the demand happened was in these dark social channels, right? One-to-one DMs, maybe a message in a community. Maybe you were on a webinar and you heard somebody else drop it. So scaled word of mouth and no real way to tie it back to where the demand is generated is what Dark Social is.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely fantastic summary. And I think you've even got a really great slide here that starts to map that journey a little bit. So I'll let you click over to that.
Yeah, right. This is a great example of, and you can see in the orange, it's touch points you can't necessarily track, but what your CRM would show, right? So LinkedIn post, very insightful. Maybe a coworker drops it in the Slack and says, check this out, right? Or they drop it, in a peer discussion on Facebook. People are talking about it. It somehow makes its way to the CEO sharing it internally on Slack and saying, hey, we should really check this out. It gets reinforced on a podcast somebody was listening to of saying, hey, Exclaimer is really that software that's taking us to the next level. And from all of these mentions, now I'm ready to go and search and see what all the hype is about. And that's where your CRM shows up and says, hey, look, guess what? We got a qualified lead from organic search. It's not really the case. A lot of things happen prior to them actually reaching your website, requesting that demo, wanting to learn more about your product. But lo and behold, that's what our attribution software lets us know what actually what they think actually happened to generate that demand.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all run into more than a few of these. Andy, I'm sure over at Hotjar, you're doing most of these, right? And there are some you can control and some you can't.
100%. Yeah. I mean, Arthur touched on it earlier. Like the thing that's changed is over the last 5-10 years is the sheer volume of places and platforms that people can use to have these conversations. You know, what you said, Arthur, about the event really resonated because I was like, before I was writing down, like, where were the places that I might be able to ask people the kind of questions that you're talking about? And I've got basically my friends, ex-colleagues, and people I met at an event. And now it's anyone on LinkedIn or who has Slack.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a much bigger group of people, which creates so many opportunities. Like my network is so much bigger now
Yeah.
than it was 10 years ago, just because it's easier to like have a connection with so many more people, which just creates more opportunities to have these kind of conversations or for interactions like the ones we've got on the screen to take place.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
No, amazing. And so I think it's not just the places where people are actually speaking on social, but if we were to really divide it up, there are a couple of places. There are things we can't track on our own website, so our own channels. We've also got social media, as you guys have both said, and it's pretty extensive. But then all those content platforms and events that we just simply can't track at all. We don't have control over those platforms. So if we were dividing up broadly, that really feels like absolutely everything. And as marketers, we're always under pressure for attribution. And I know we're going to touch on this later. And I know you've both got some great thoughts on this, and actually great tactics as well to share. So I won't dwell on this too much. But I think one of the key points, and I know everyone loves a Chris Walker Refined Labs quote, but buying is happening pretty much everywhere across all of those touch points that you shared, Arthur. And I think that's one of the real key points, because we can't be everywhere, we can't track it. And I know you've got a really, I think you both have a really interesting way of talking about what you can actually do to drive those engagements and actually create a situation where you can control as much as you can that kind of dark social space. Or I know there's a more traditional way of referring to it that you might talk about, which is word of mouth. So I won't say too much on this, but really to recap, a lot of the places that you've touched upon in your slide, and we've got places that are considered dark. I don't know, I guess I would challenge each of you. Are you using most of these? Are you active in most of these? Have you attended most of these types of things?
Yeah, I think so. I think one that's and maybe you both have a little bit more insight, have been more a part of these WhatsApp groups. But it seems like in different regions, maybe outside of North America, it's becoming more and more popular. Yeah, I think in ways where we're doing a little bit of everything. I think Reddit's really interesting, especially maybe for that more technical audience. I mean, you can find a Reddit thread on anything these days, right? So yeah, I think it's all pretty encompassing of where we're trying to focus a lot of our marketing resources and how we're going to market on our side. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, likewise. I mean, obviously, my team, the growth team, we spend a lot of time doing things that aren't this, but then we've got a very, very close eye on all of these things because we have a decent understanding of how people actually buy things. And so the majority of these, not everything, but we're looking at it quite closely, or we're active in those areas. Or when it comes to things like the Slack groups, or like we focus on making things shareable. So like I can't force someone to talk about us in a community. But what we can do is try and create something that is valuable enough to talk about. And so we kind of have that approach when we're thinking about some of the content that we're creating, or just the way that we go about what we do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about making it shareable, because there are so many opportunities now, whether it be word of mouth, in person, and even if it's people talking about experiences. I think you mentioned a great word there, value. I think that is the huge difference maker. And I just wanted to challenge you guys, I suppose, with the next question. Why do you think dark social is thriving at the moment and it's becoming more and more popular? I know we're talking about it in marketing, but are consumers turning to this space? What's happening?
I think it comes down to trust, right? And motives. We all, especially in our area of work, right? We know that the brand is trying to sell us something, whereas the peer probably just wants to help, and it's kind of like, and that's why you see people leaning into this, because they're seeking unbiased advice from someone they trust. Right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? Where if you look at the role of sales and marketing, I think peers and customers speak to something that sales and marketing rarely can, which we can speak to the what, which is the product we sell. We can speak to maybe the why of the problem that we're aiming to solve in the market, but almost never can we speak to the how. Hey, this is how I use it day to day. This is how it integrates with my tech stack. Let me share my screen and go through all of the bells and whistles. And I think that's what more and more people want to see, because they're doing a lot of that research by themselves, right? If you're looking at how much time a sales rep has now as part of the entire buyer's journey, it's becoming less and less. We see product-led growth thriving. People want to do as much of the buying journey themselves. And to both of your points, there's this internal bias, right? If it's us saying, hey, check out how great Hotjar, Chili Piper, Exclaimer is, our alarm bells start to ring. And it's like, well, of course they would say that because they work for the company. But if it's coming from a peer or somebody that I trust, I value, I respect in terms of the content they're putting out, and they're saying, hey, go check out Chili Piper, now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is an unbiased source that is somebody I respect within my realm. Okay, now this actually has some merit to it. So I think more and more the buyers are recognizing what it is that they actually want to know in their journey. And sometimes it's not all our internal sales and marketing tactics that's going to get them to there. I think more and more people just want to hear and learn from their peers, specifically that how piece of how does it work day to day with my tech stack, involved with rolling it out across my entire team, all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And as you touched upon earlier, there's so many private channels now, whether it be WhatsApp or these Slack communities and things like that. I got to ask guys, how many channels do you think you must be in yourselves that are outside of your workplace?
Like Slack communities alone, probably, I don't know, 10 that I'm a part of. It's just getting so noisy there that it's tough to keep up. I think, yeah, LinkedIn, despite how I feel like present I am there, there's just a load of messages that it's so hard to keep up. So yeah, we're getting bombarded with a lot of these dark social channels from all different places.
100%. I was going to say 10 as well. I think that's a fair estimate. It's quite a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that's a rule. If you haven't got 10, you haven't got enough, then you need to be trying harder. But also, do you think there's anything has changed in the state of MarTech? I know when you see those big tables with all the different software solutions and everything like that, there seems to be more tooling than ever. Do you think that's affected people's decision making, that they're leaning in a different way, or they're making decisions in a different way?
Yeah, it has to, just because there's the volume of choice. There's a phenomenon called choice paralysis, right? Which is where you have too many things to choose from. It makes it harder to actually choose. So part of it is like a cry for help in making a decision. And like the way that some of those the kind of the SaaS platforms proliferated like that is that a platform will be created and then it will expand its offering, and then a new one comes in that competes with a subset of that offering, and then they grow, and then so on and so forth. So this just continues to increase. But from a buyer, that means you have a mass of different platforms that seemingly overlap, but you're not quite sure how, and you don't know who's really good and all of the rest of it. So it's not surprising, given the just the mass of tech available, that people go looking for help, and they go looking for help again, going back to like someone that they trust and feel like they can rely on.
Yeah, and I think trust is definitely the biggest part here and the biggest focus. And I think we've even got a lovely little quotation here. And I know it's about consumers, right? But in general, but I think now we are getting closer to being, I hate the term human to human. But in B2B, we are still buying things, and we do lean on others for recommendations. I certainly know I'd ask either of you if I want a recommendation on a tool you're already using. It would just make sense to me.
It just carries more weight, right? Because I'm speaking from a perspective of, yes, I've used it. This is how it's worked for me. These are the the opportunities of the tool, these are the drawbacks, and if you're cool with that, then go for it, right? It's so less biased to the type of information that you're getting from a peer, where if you hear directly from somebody in the company, it's like best in class this, world class this, streamline, optimize, like holy crap, I'm getting everything. But as humans, our BS radar is so good that it's like we don't even believe that, right? So that's why it's, yeah, more and more we're reaching out to our peers to be like, okay, let me get the actual real insight into what is it like to use this product, not the hypey types of claims that every company makes around their world-class product.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. And I think that would lead us on nicely now on what we can actually do to engage people on Dark Social. And Arthur, I know you spend a lot of time creating different environments or different experiences for people, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, happy to, Ben. So I think this is actually a nice little story that kind of encompasses what we're talking about. So we're all in 10 Slack groups. This went back to when I switched over to marketing from sales in 2020. We actually sponsored quite a bit of communities. It was the flavor of the month. Everybody was starting their own community. There was even a little bit of incentive for us to start our own Chili Piper community. And my manager at the time pushed back on that and said, look, there's enough communities out there that we can support them, make sure our audience is there, and see what we can do with them. As a result, some of those assets, resources that these communities would provide would be some in-person dinners. And we did a couple of them. We realized there were some drawbacks in terms of the type of audience, the type of companies that were coming to these. They were a little earlier in their journey. So we kind of had the idea and said, hey, instead of doing this with a community, why don't we search out another company that has similar ICP, similar audience of what we're going after, and go to market with them, and then kind of cut out the middleman, not rely on them too much. So we really doubled down on in-person events from the perspective of like these micro executive dinners, 20 to 30 attendees, pretty intimate, having these discussions. And what we realized were the most successful ones that we had, we aim to create this peer-to-peer environment, right? So we're inviting our customers and sneakily sitting our best customers beside our best prospects and letting them have discussions around what is top of mind for their specific persona, right? And letting it happen much more organically than if we were up there doing a presentation on why Chili Piper would be a great tool for them to add to their tech stack. And it was actually incredible to see. To this day, I wish I recorded word for word what one of our customers said to a co-founder. They said about 2 to 3 sentences, and the co-founder said, "Oh yeah, that sounds like it's a no-brainer." And grant you, this was a deal that was pretty much stuck in pipeline. The sales rep didn't know what to do. They're like, "Hey, should I invite him to this dinner?" I was like, "Go for it." And by aiming to create these environments, right, that your customers and your prospects can thrive in, it seems less salesy. They're hearing directly from a peer. That really helped us in how we were like approaching field marketing in a way. I guess now how we're approaching Dark Social is, how do we create more of these experiences where our customers and our prospects can engage and interact with each other organically, and maybe we can nudge them a little bit in regards to the direction of the topics we want them to chat about. But that has served us pretty well here at Chili Piper back in 2022. I don't know if we have that slide here, Ben, around. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, and to give you an idea here at Chili Piper, I'd say our target customer, we're looking for probably 100 plus employees, 10 sales reps. Our average contract value is just under 10,000. So we definitely attended quite a bit of trade shows, did some in-person executive dinners, did some offsite activations, but it was really cool. I think the other thing to mention here is we looked at it as a year-end result in terms of 2022, right? I think a lot of people are looking at it as like, cool, we invested in this dinner. What the heck happened? in terms of ROI and revenue. So some for sure were short term, like that example I mentioned, with that co-founder closing in like 3 weeks after the dinner. But I think you do need to take a longer term approach to, is this stuff actually working? So this was a year in review for us, and yeah, we drove over 1,100 qualified meetings and $7 million in pipeline, really by focusing on creating these environments where peers can actually have these organic discussions amongst themselves.
No, I mean, that's amazing results, and everyone loves to see a graph like that, don't they? Andy, I imagine you got something similar on your side as well in Hotjar.
Yeah, I kind of have my own version of it from Hotjar, which I've got on the slide I'll talk about in a sec. But in a past life, I've worked in more sales-led companies, generating pipeline for sales teams, kind of like the model that you're talking about here. And I can speak to these kind of dinners or breakfast events, whichever way you want to do it, as being super powerful. There's something magical about that dynamic that Arthur just described, where you can have that prospect sat next to a happy customer, and it has this kind of dual value, because obviously you're bringing your best customers, your most valuable customers, so you have like a kind of almost like a churn defense relationship, like solidification part to it there as well, along with the prospect of either accelerating pipeline or generating new pipeline. It's just such a lovely activity to get going if you can make it work.
Yeah, and I think something interesting that you both touched upon there is it depends on the business model as well, right? So Arthur, do you think you've adopted this style because it's sales-led, or was it the first thing you guys were trying because it was the color of the month? How did you approach that?
It's a great question. Probably, yeah, there's something to be said about us being sales-led, although I will speak to the whole last touch attribution wars, that when we started doing these events, we kind of kept sales out of it. I think part of it was also trying to understand or place a bet that part of the reason I think these communities got so big is we were all holed up inside and we couldn't meet face to face with other people, and we were forced to kind of meet digitally. And I think a lot of these Slack communities exploded because of that. And we kind of placed the bet that at some point people are going to want to come back to in person. So can we almost be first back to market to start hosting some of these events and capture a little bit of that magic? Because our events have evolved, but at the beginning it was like just putting a bunch of people together, giving them dinner and drinks, and they're like, oh my God, best event ever. But it's because they're just spent like a year holed up in their house, right? So we've included a little bit more programming. So I think it's an interesting point where we don't have like the traditional field marketing where it's like geographically based. We're kind of just going all across. Most of our customers are in North America. We have some good logos in EMEA, but I'd say for the most part, we're just, looking to see where there's a congregation of potential accounts and revenue leaders, and then throwing events there, but more so maybe capitalizing on the timing of the market and wanting to come back to in-person maybe a little quicker than most.
That's such a good point. Weirdly, I had that conversation at a community dinner last night. The very thing we were discussing is the mass proliferation of the Slack community and how much nicer and freer the conversation was around the dinner table. Because once the Slack community gets big, you're wondering, like, am my team on here? Does that affect what I say? Are my competitors on here? That definitely affects what I want to say and what questions I want to ask. I don't want to just like let everyone know all my problems and like our complete tech stack, so our competitors can go and run away with it. And that just affects what you say, and then that affects the how freely you speak within that bigger community. Whereas if you're at a dinner or some drinks or whatever, then it's much easier to have like a more transparent conversation. Plus, you might have had a couple of glasses of something as well, which always helps like loosen the tongue in these situations, which can help.
I think you make a really good point there. It definitely feels like the information is freer, and if you are sharing with peers, just like in any interaction, if you share something that's not going super well, someone else might have a fix for it. But also they'll be comfortable to share something they have overcome or they have got a soul for as well. And I know that makes it sound a little bit transactional, but really it is because everyone's relaxed, and it's not a competitive situation. In most of the communities you two are in, do they tend to be on the smaller end of the scale or the larger size?
I think at this point they've all pretty much got pretty pretty large followings and have become pretty noisy. I'm thinking back to like when they first started, and there seemed to be really engaging, thoughtful discussions amongst peers. Now it does. I mean, in some communities, I can't say this for all of them, but I think sales has started to realize that this is where buying conversations are happening, and they're trying to chime in and saying, "Hey, I heard you talk about this problem. I have a tool that solves exactly that." So a little bit more pitching in these communities that I know they try and step away from. So yeah, I don't know. I think to answer your question, it does seem like they've expanded to the point where it is tough to maintain that same level of quality conversation, in-depth back and forth. Yeah, now it might be just to like validate kind of how you're thinking about it, and not as, at least some of the communities that I'm a part of, but I can't speak for you, Andy or Ben.
I have the same experience, and I know the community's tried desperately to stop them being salesy, but if it's a Slack community, they have no control over what happens in the DMs, right? So people can just message about whatever. So yeah, so they're all kind of getting quite big, almost like victims of their own success. Like that, to succeed as a community, you need more members, but inevitably that changes the experience of that community over time.
Yeah. It seems like that's the only model to scale. But I mean, in my experience in sponsoring a lot of these, I think, and I might steal this term from Alice, the CMO at Cognizant, but she calls it value loop marketing. And it seems like the best communities, what they have is this episodic, consistent type of event that new members, repeat members consistently go to because they get value from it. So one that comes to mind, I know Sales Assembly has like a weekly sales leader call every Thursday where sales leaders hop on time and time again to hear what challenges and opportunities their peers are experiencing. I know we mentioned Chris Walker and Refine Labs. They always have like a weekly show where a lot of repeat attendees come through. And to me, that's like now becoming almost the gold standard of what a successful community is. Do you have some sort of value loop marketing, some sort of consistent event that new and repeat members are coming to time and time again? I think that would define you as like a pretty healthy community. I think there's a lot that are just taking in sponsorships, doing these random webinars, and it's tough for members to sift through all of that. But if there's one like consistent event that they show up time and time to, again, because they're getting value from members, that's where I think you're getting into like some really good communities.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think I just wanted to jump back to one of the things you touched on earlier. And Andy, you'd mentioned about the different models. And I want to start talking about which type of tactics are probably appropriate for people as well, because it doesn't mean you can do all of these. I think both of you had said, hey, are we thinking about buying a community, creating a community? Is there space for that? So, Andy, I wanted to kick it over to you and maybe talk about your approach over at Hotjar.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, we have kind of two major ways that we kind of think about like word of mouth, dark social, whatever you want to call it. And one of them is actually to recognize how powerful it is and how a larger part of our kind of growth comes from word of mouth. We talk about it at like a business leadership level as a thing that we need to like nurture and protect. So it kind of comes into like product value conversations and things like that, because at the simplest level, if we're creating a valuable thing, that can be marketing creating a valuable thing, or it could be us creating a valuable product together. More people using it I've got a slide for this. More people using it on like a weekly or monthly basis is essentially more people who could say nice things about us in the market or positive things about us in the market. More people churning is the opposite. So that dynamic of kind of your active user base versus the amount that you get from word of mouth or the amount of positivity you have within the market are absolutely related. Like, it logically makes sense, and if you're inclined to do so, you can do the analysis and it kind of lines up. So that's like one thing, is like it's like a precious asset for the business, and it's discussed in that way. But then in terms of marketing, I know that's like a bit macro, right? And maybe not as actionable as like the other things we've been speaking about. But from a pure marketing perspective, we're actually trying to do like almost like a larger scale version of what Arthur was just talking about, right? We have quite a different model at Hotjar. We're predominantly self-serve. We like product-led growth. Like, we do have a sales team who will kind of give like white glove experience to larger companies, but the vast majority of the people coming through our door, they self-serve. A lot of them use our freemium product. It means that we've got higher volume but much lower average sale price. So a massive network of in-person dinners, it's just not really going to work for us. So we have to find another way to do it. And the way that we're approaching it is this idea of like live events at scale. So we're currently doing one a month. They're online because our customer base is all over the world. And the main focus is to make the sessions as engaging, as interactive as possible. So that's kind of our overarching goal, is we offer, like we were talking about value earlier, make sure they're valuable. And we want to make sure they're valuable because our measures of success here are people coming back, and are the number of people that are coming increasing? So it's almost like, do we get people to come back because we offered value last time, and are they telling their friends? Those are the kind of things that we're trying to look at in like how we do these events. They're like online events. We're doing them on a platform like the one we're using right now, trying to keep it as engaging as possible, and just having like a regular clip of that. I mean, I describe it here as a community activity. There's kind of define community quite broadly there as kind of anyone in the market who might be interested in being part of what Hotjar are doing, and that can be like the product that we're selling or the way that we go about our business, like the kind of the values that the company has. But it also includes peer companies that have a similar target audience, where we're non-competitive peers. So we're doing some co-marketing. That's something we're going to start looking at more frequently, where we can come together. And so it's almost then the community then starts being defined as like SaaS is our community, and we're just participating within it as much as we can, and like inviting that community into these events, just to keep that constant clip of kind of a point of engagement, where we're able to sort of it's get some face-to-face in person, virtual in person, is that a thing? Some like some kind of engagement where we get as close to two people sat around the dinner table without actually being able to sit around the dinner table, because it's difficult for us to do it at the scale we need to.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good effort. And I've got to ask, you said they're virtual. Is this something where you're doing them, what kind of frequency? Is it yearly? Is this something where you're trying to have more of a regular clip going?
One a month.
One a month?
One a month for now, yeah. That's,
are you thinking of changing that anytime soon, or have you now found that's the right frequency for you and for your business?
That was the right frequency we could commit to at first. Right, because we're just getting started, right? Like, if the team asked me, I'd be like, do like once a fortnight, once a week, go big or go home. But once a month we can do. Like, with a combination of kind of we'll have some customers come in as guests. We have some external speakers come in as guests, and we'll do some ourselves. So between those three streams of kind of guest speakers coming in, we can do one a month relatively easily. But yeah, over time we may increase it rather than decrease it, but we're kind of learning as we go, just like anything, right?
And I'm curious, Andy, what are like some of the themes that you talk about? I know you mentioned you do some yourself, you bring in guests. Is this like more tactical, actionable takeaways. Yeah, can you share an example of one that really stood out to you?
Yeah, great. So I give you like our standout so far from this year is that we had a guest. He's sort of a guest speaker. He used to work for Hotjar. Now it's someone else, but he did 10 examples of behavioral like insights that can help you with marketing. So it was like really interesting, like but quite actionable. Loads of surprising things, examples people hadn't thought of. So we have like that a guest speaker will come and talk about things like that. Now the theme within it, like Hotjar's a great tool. The way that I sometimes describe what we do is like if you have your analytics tool that gives you the numbers that tell you what's going on in your website or product, Hotjar will allow you to like look over the shoulder of the person doing things. You can actually see what they're doing. So it's a very kind of like a customer understanding tool. Like the kind of the goal is like that you can create empathy with your own user and therefore build something better. So a lot of our speakers come in, they talk about behavioral insights. They'll talk about like conversion, why people do certain things that they do. Our guest speakers are very much in that theme. The Hotjar speakers will be our last one. Basically, someone in my team, he did basically a masterclass in how we approach SEO.
I see.
So it's a bit more niche, right? But it's very much a kind of like, this is how we do what we do. And by the way, if you want to use the Hotjar tool to do this really well, like we pepper that into the presentation. So that's they're a bit more educational, kind of like direct learning type style.
That's awesome.
Nice. And that's definitely, as you both said before, it's definitely putting value first and offering people something they can actually use and actually want. Arthur, is there anything like that you guys have been focusing on or been trying to build out in addition to these events as part of the events that you do?
Yeah, it's nothing that we're doing now. Now we're starting to do more customer-led webinars. So really speaking to what I mentioned earlier, the how, right, of how they use Chili Piper day to day, the giving a little bit of behind the scenes of how they manage it. The other one that I've always wanted to do to kind of evolve these executive dinners that we're doing is more almost, the tactical workshop style. I've been thinking potentially do it with our channel partners, the ones that frequently are implementing Chili Piper or working with a company that has a complex tech stack and they're solving these problems and doing almost like speed to lead workshops, right? Of like, level 1, this is what it looks like, how you do it within your CRM. Level 2, maybe level 3 is how you use Chili Piper to really achieve like instant speed to lead type of thing. So nothing right now, but we're definitely trending in that direction of listening to our audience, what they want to see and hear and learn, and then trying to create those types of events similar to what Andy is doing, where they know their audience. I love the theme and the connection between the behavioral type of decisions that people are making and how Hotjar helps with that. So nothing imminent or like immediate, but definitely going down that direction of getting a little bit more tactical and showing the how.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely makes sense. And that seems to be both what you're doing there. Maybe I could talk a little bit about what we're trying to do at Exclaimer. I mean, we definitely do a lot of this, and we're starting to build out those processes as well. But within Dark Social, we've talked about it being trusted channels that people are messaging privately. And as you may know, we are email signature management tool, and it is something for marketers. So we've really been looking at how can we help people to amplify their message in a trusted channel. And given everything we've talked about, we know we can't control all of the channels, but we can certainly get our message out there. So just to quickly plug our product before we move on, and I will unashamedly talk about this. Our email signature tool, it is a way to get in front of your customers, because I think it's not always the sales teams that are messaging customers and product prospects. Often it is the finance team talking to people, procurement teams talking to people, and they are having those conversations. So marketers using our tool can be as subtle or as impactful as they want. And it's just a way to get in front of people with that extra message in a channel where they already feel comfortable talking and they're using it for business. But look, I won't get you guys to comment on this. We'll continue to speed through, because I know, Andy, you've got a great section on attribution coming up. And of course, it is worth me mentioning that it's not just us using Exclaimer. We do drink our own champagne, but there are plenty of other companies that are trying to do this as well. And I know we're all here today to actually talk about dark social, so I won't spend too much time on that. But Andy, I'll pass it over to you for attribution and actually getting buy-in on how to get this done.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to talk about attribution and buy-in together because they're super connected. Because whatever you do, part of getting buy-in is collecting some data and making a commitment. And those two things then pretty much dictate then how you measure success afterwards. So the two are sort of super related. But I wanted to just talk about like a process that I've followed at Hotjar and have done at previous companies as well, which is around building the case for something that like this, or you could call it building a case for dark social if you're interested in shifting from like lead gen to like demand gen, the whole demand creation thing. Similar process can help there too. What you're really doing is you're going on a voyage of discovery and finding out how people actually buy what you sell, which may be different to how you thought they buy it. It may also be different to how you would like them to buy it. That's the sort of sad reality that we have to face. And like the reason to do this is just to kind of so you can have like an honest and realistic conversation about how people buy the product. Because once you get to that point of how like total like realism about how some people buy your product, then you can actually act in a way that is aligned with their buying process. So rather than trying to force a buying process onto your customer or potential customers that they have no interest in following, you actually align yourself to their process, which is more successful. So the first question is simply, where's growth coming from today, right? And you kind of need to do two pieces of analysis to do that, which is super aligned to the slide that we had right at the start, right? The little snaking journey that someone goes through, right? Which is there is something that your attribution software will tell you, and then there's something else which people will actually tell you. So at Hotjar, unsurprisingly, we use Hotjar for this. So kind of the attribution software we have like sitting somewhere else. Hotjar doesn't do that, but for what people do tell you, we use kind of our survey product either on the website or in the product, and then we have a user testing type style product called Engage, which we use for in-person interviews. So try and balance those two. I know. In some corners of LinkedIn, sometimes there's a debate about whether you should you ask the question like, where did you first hear about us, and you offer multiple choice or free text. Now there are positives and negatives of doing both. Free text, you get better data, but it's a pig to analyze. Multiple choice, you do add in bias, but it's a bit easier to analyze. The volume of data you're collecting is a massive factor in which one you choose. Because we were talking about models before, because we're a fairly high volume business, we opt in that survey for multiple choice because it makes our lives a bit easier. But then we supplement it with customer conversations, so we can go and pick up that more qualitative research as well. And the data will be different, right? The outcomes from this analysis will be different in every business, but it's always illuminating. So this is kind of a pretty good representation of what we found at Hotjar when we do this analysis. We see that the attribution software tells us it's direct, organic, and paid search, like pile more money into those things. And self-reported says something completely different, which is this is dark social at work, right? Like this is what we've been talking about. This is the the reporting we have available to us, like almost proving that this thing exists. And that's why I put it like, one, this is attribution in action, but two, this is also how you build the case, which is why like help those around you if you need to understand that this is how people buy. Almost like the attribution software is lying to us. It's not lying to us, but like there's more to it than what you can see there, because inevitably those systems they can only track things in and around your website, and an awful lot of stuff happens off of that. Just to illustrate that, this was like the killer insight when doing this analysis at Hotjar was the sheer volume of people whose first touch was like a branded search touch onto our website. I was like, wow, someone somewhere is talking to someone, because like there's no one who's like going to bed and having a dream about Hotjar and just waking up in the morning and being like they've been visited by their spirit animal in the night. I must go to that website. Like they found out about us somewhere, right? So which is why we did do the self-reporting, to try and understand where those somewheres are. And then you can kind of, that's like the first bit of the case. The other part, like you've got the data, right? So what would you do next? I know in some companies, I think maybe Arthur and I are in a different situation to others, in that I know that I have an open door to explore these kinds of like tactics and things like that we've been speaking about. Arthur, you have it in your job title, so I'm guessing you've got an open door as well, right? So but that's not always the case, right? I've had it at other places where it's not the case. You get the data, and that's like part of the battle, or like part of the journey. So what would you do next? So one thing I would suggest, the first one is like, you need to allocate some money to it, but you can take some of the risk out of it, or the perceived risk of going down this path, by really controlling the budget. So if you only commit to say 10% of your total budget, or 5%, or whatever you choose, then even if it goes horribly wrong, it can only go horribly wrong to like a certain degree. I'll kind of add into that the time frame stuff that we were talking about earlier. And then the second one, going back to the jargon stuff that we were talking about right at the start, is speaking plain language. So we were talking about the kind of the dinners. There are two very different ways that you could decide to describe those dinners to your peers and leadership. I'm kind of poking fun at it here, obviously, on the slide, but there's two possible ways you could describe it. Do the second one, not the first one. I've definitely made this mistake before, like at my last, like pitching the idea of demand creation and demand capture, and then about halfway through this slide, really realizing that no one understood what the hell I was talking about. As I've been there, I carry the scars. Please don't do what I did. Just speaking like language that everyone understands. It's the same thing, but the conversation you end up having will be completely different.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal point. And it sounds like you both in setups. And actually, I'm happy to say that at Exclaimer, we also have the same setup here, that people will listen, and they're definitely at the top level, they're engaged, they want to try new things. And we're very, very fortunate. Now, you've been able to make a bit of this argument, given the relationship you have with your wider team, but also with some of the data you've collected from that self-reported attribution. I know there might be an obvious answer to this, but how essential is collecting that data, and what advice would you give to someone who's yet to start capturing that?
Just try and make it easy for yourself. And I say that by like, let's imagine the situation where like the product team owns the website and they own the demo form, and you decide that the best way to do it is to follow the gold star advice and put a free text form on the demo field. To do that, you've got to get that various teams to agree to it, including whoever owns the CRM. And they've got, you're just like creating like layers and layers of barriers to doing that. There are other ways, there are other tools that could allow you just to create a pop-up and do it. So I would look for kind of shortcuts to collecting the data. You must do that though. There's no avoiding that part of the process. Like if you just have your attribution data and then you have a story to support the rest of it, it's going to be harder. If you've got a challenge conversation, right? If the door is open and like, people kind of understand it anyway, then maybe not. But if you do feel like you have to make a case, you must have the self-reported attribution.
Yeah, I think otherwise then it just sounds like it's your opinion, right? And you're not coming to your executives with facts or the research you've done. So you definitely need it on some level. It's a good point, Andy. And I don't know if we've actually discussed this, but we don't ourselves here at Chili Piper put it in on the form. We actually do it once they've successfully booked a demo, and then we redirect them to what I believe to be a Hotjar. And we ask them, hey, how did you first hear about us? And then that spits out into our Slack channel. So that's definitely lower lift on all of the CRM admins and police that happen internally, and we get that data as a marketing team. And that's actually helping us build the case now to kind of look for ways in which we can move that request more up in the form and in the funnel. But yeah, I think without data, building your cases, it's just going to sound like your opinion versus your executives, and that's often a very tough battle to win.
100%. And if it is a challenge, just think about you need to capture data through a form. Think about the forms you own. So as a marketing team, you definitely own event sign-up forms. Okay, there you go. Start there. Like if it's super hard, start there. Right? Even if all that does is build a case to put it on a different form and a different form, right? Just kind of like progressively work towards what you really want, but think about what you actually own and what you can control. You definitely own that form. Like if you do any gated content, you probably own that form too. So like just kind of like think about it in those terms to kind of like progressively work your way towards the goal.
Yeah, and without getting old school here, because I know we've got people from companies of all sizes attending this. I think one of the things we've done in the past is actually we've had a very good relationship with the sales team, and we've asked them to make that one of their questions that they're asking when they actually get to people in on those discovery calls and actually finding out exactly what it is. Now, I guess it depends on how strong is your handle over the technology. Do you own the entry points? Or how strong is your relationship with the sales team, and can we make that part of the workflow? And I guess every organization is different, right? Because interestingly, the two of you are here and you're both doing it in different ways, but achieving the result.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great, have had a similar thing in the past where it was part of SDR discovery, or kind of like whoever's doing first call demo would ask that question, which is super insightful.
Yeah, we try and bake it into really each revenue department has kind of a role to play in this dark social attribution piece. So we mentioned on the marketing use case, we use Hotjar after they've successfully booked a demo. But we do actually make this a required field for sales reps when they're creating opportunities of how did they first hear about us, right? So we're putting another check and balance on sales. They have to fill that out. And it's a free text form for sales as well. And then finally, once they get onboarded, CS is actually having that conversation again and just almost like validating or double dipping into like, hey, I see you mentioned like you first heard about us on LinkedIn. How did that come about? And having a little bit more of a qualitative layer there. So that way each revenue department has kind of a check and balance where we're getting this data and seeing if it kind of aligns all the way through and if it matches up to like attribution software and everything. So yeah, we do aim to do it, but you're right. It has to be a larger discussion, and we do have a pretty good relationship here with sales at Chili Piper.
Yeah, and I suppose this would be a good moment to recap from start to finish here what we're actually talking about and what we believe are good strategies to actually go forward with. And I would invite both of you to touch upon any of these if you wanted to. But I think even if you were just to roll through them, the first one for me, it's clearly Arthur and Andy, you both saying you're creating a reason for people to actually talk about what you do with each other, and you're actually creating that environment. And then Andy, to your point earlier, I think you've actually talked about how you can actually shape the product to actually deliver that value and get people talking. So both of you are attacking dark social from two very different angles, and I think you've got a very good toolkit for that. Is there anything we've missed or you'd like to add?
Andy, anything on your end?
I don't think it's I miss, but it's like I think one really important takeaway would be that every company is slightly different, right? So we're talking from a perspective like the way that it will roll out or could roll out in the companies that anyone attending this event would need to do in a slightly different way. Like they can take a lot of it, but the actual application, like the how, right? It needs to apply to your business, and a lot of that's going to be dictated by things like stakeholders, size of team, size of budget, the tools you have available to you, what your average contract value is, like your primary model, PLG, sales-led, combination of the two, whatever. All of these are really important factors. So like this is like your tick list for like your how and to what degree you do we do all of these things. To what degree we have to do them is dictated by the business that we work for.
Yeah, and actually, one of the questions we had was actually, there are so many different tactics we can go for now. How many is it realistic to take on? And I think you really touched upon it there.
Yeah, the answer that all marketers love is, yeah, it depends, right? There's so many variables on what you can achieve. I think, like, to me, when we think dark social and like creating these environments for customers and peer-to-peer engagement, because I think that's where like B2B buying is heading down. It's more this idea of engaging with peers, and also understanding what your buyer actually is talking about or cares about. Very rarely is it going to be, like Andy said, a dream of Hotjar that I'm like, oh my God, I have to think about this. There's like the jobs to do framework, right? Of like, they're getting the job done. They're moving from point A to point B. But are they thinking about ways in which that could be easier? So looking at it from like a shareability perspective, I really like that point that you brought up, Andy, of like, how can we approach our marketing and the message that we want to deliver from a perspective of, yeah, the content. Is it something that I would want to share with a peer? Is it something that we know to be true that they're talking about? Maybe you did some sort of community analysis and you said, hey, these are the 5 topics that seem to come up time and time again that our personas are talking about. So I think as long as you're looking at it from a perspective of what do our buyers care about, what are they talking about, and how do we create resources around that are shareable, and you're creating environments and experiences for them to engage peer-to-peer. Yeah, I don't know. You're doing dark social, and I think you're doing marketing right.
Oh, that sounds good. Would you have any advice around realistic expectations for people? I know we've had a question about that. How do you set a goal for one of your dark social activities? I mean, I'm assuming if it's coming up to the end of the quarter and we need to close the gap, it's not the right time to start a community. But is there anything you'd be telling your exec team when you're starting off an initiative to go after a bit of dark social or create something special for your audience?
I think if you take almost like a staged approach of realistic timelines, and I'm probably quoting Refine Labs here, but they almost have this like phase 1 of, does whatever campaign strategy we just reached, is it at least starting to be mentioned in terms of the self-reported attribution? Then you're getting some signals there, right? So it's not coming at it and saying, hey, we're going to try this program and it's going to drive $100,000 in bottom of line revenue and this and that. It's like, hey, we're going to try this program, and phase 1 goal is, let's see, out of all of the demo requests, do 5 of them mention that, hey, yeah, this thing I actually came in through. And you're like, cool, now we got one indicator that's giving us positive indications that maybe now we move on to phase 2. Okay, we see that it's working. Now let's actually put a little bit more money on it. So going from, how do you show executives early leading indicators that your dark social experiment is working, and can you get it at least mentioned in some of the people that are coming in inbound saying, yes, this has had an effect on my journey?
And we have got one more question. I know we're short on time, and we try to incorporate some of them as we go. And this might be a challenging one for each of you. Which would you say are the best channels or platforms to use for dark social? Or if that's too broad, can I frame that by saying, in the next quarter or for H2, where would you spend your time and effort? You got scared to give away your roadmaps now?
No, I'm just thinking like for us, buyers are our buyers are on LinkedIn, and I think more and more. So to me, everybody's obsessed with all of these Slack communities. I almost looked at LinkedIn as a community, right? The value loop. People are signing in there every day They're sharing information. If you're following good folks, sharing valuable information, having discussions, one-to-one DMs are being had. So if you're gonna if you're strapped for something rather than trying to find the perfect community, I would just say show up on LinkedIn, right? And how are you like adding to the conversation, or maybe even commenting on other folks' insightful content.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like I said, from a platform, it's LinkedIn, and from a kind of strategic perspective, you can look for aligned individuals, as in people that have like where you can create like mutually beneficial partnerships and kind of work together is a way of accelerating kind of your kind of dark social journey.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point to end on. And for both of you, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your knowledge today. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get tons of value out of this. I certainly know I did. I'm going to be thinking about a lot of the tactics that you shared here and be trying to incorporate them into our strategy at Exclaimer. Yeah, for anyone watching, details, the LinkedIn profiles of Andy, of Arthur, again, thank you so much. And for everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Hope to see you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thanks a lot. Cheers. See ya.
Cheers.